Hi, everybody. Miss Amanda here. You want to say hi, Ro? I'm here with Ro, and we're going to read our book. Hold on. I got my background, so it kind of messes it up. Tirzah. Jeez, there it is. Tirzah, okay? We're going to start in chapter 14. We're going to finish our book up, okay, guys? Because we weren't able to finish it in class this year, and I really want to, Miss Mary and I want to make sure you guys get to see what happens for the rest of the book, okay? And you don't have to listen to it all at once. You can take your time and listen to a little bit, little by little, however you guys want to do it, okay? Enjoy. Okay, so the Mountain of God, that's this chapter that we're going to read right now. So after all these years, you, my husband, are the one chosen to be a judge over our people. Leah glowed with pride as she straightened a fold in Jerahil's headpiece. I always knew you were wise. Jerahil smiled and caught his wife about her growing waistline. My little love, it's only as head of 50 that I am appointed. But it is a grave responsibility. I'm touched by the trust given me. On the other hand, I've had a bit of experience ruling over this household. Looking around first at Tirzah, then Ram and Oren, he grew his eyebrows into a mock frown. Yes, Father, Oren spoke up quickly, and a good thing we have given you enough trouble to make you sharp. Oren ducked as his father reached a playful hand to tug at his ear. I must meet with the other judges this morning, good wife. Everything Moses has told us to do must be done exactly. We are to wash our clothes today and be ready for tomorrow, when Yahweh will speak from Mount Sinai. Tirzah, my dove, help your mother. He touched the tip of Tirzah's nose gently before he strode away. Well then, you heard your father. There is work to do, her mother said, heading for the washing sticks. Tirzah took down the basket and her spare clothes. She would wear these while the others were being washed. Ram had walked away silently, and Oren was about to follow when Tirzah grabbed the neck of his tunic. No, you don't, she said. You can help with the beating, and besides, how can we wash your clothes with you still in them? I wasn't going for long, Oren growled, his face flushed with anger and guilt at the half-truth. He bit his lip with frustration, trying to think of an excuse to be gone, but nothing came. In his mind was a picture of Mary, Passier's niece, hands protecting her face from the pebbles thrown by Cheleb, the potter's son, and two other boys as she passed. Yesterday, Oren had seen her drawing water at an hour when none of the other girls were near to protect her. He had no idea what to do, but now it would have to wait. Leah looked at her young son, frowned, and handed him a washing stick. Change your clothes, then off with your sister, and mind you stay until all the washing is finished. Oren felt a sinking in his stomach. There would be no escape for hours yet. In a deserted spot about a quarter mile outside the camp, Mary sat sheltered by large overhanging rocks. She would hide until noon and then return to Hannah to fetch the washing. By that time, the others, their washing was done, would leave. They would be glad to go back to the cool protection of the tents from the midday sun. She looked at her hands darkened by the sun, strong hands. On the back of one palm was a purple bruise where one of the larger pebbles had struck her. Gently, she rubbed the spot. Now, I'm just going to stop for a second. Do you guys remember who Mary is? Mary is an Egyptian girl who escaped Egypt with Hannah, who's an older woman. She was an older midwife, and she's a Hebrew woman, right? She's an Israelite. But she's an Egyptian girl. So some of the children in the camp, they bully her, right? Do you guys remember that? Because she's Egyptian, okay? I just wanted to make sure you guys... No, my phone, honey. My phone's leaning on that. I just wanted to make sure you guys remembered that, okay, who she was. So the welt would heal, its color fade, but nothing would heal the fact that she was an Egyptian by birth, one of the hated people. Some of the Israelites were kind, as if they saw only the Mary who wanted to follow Yahweh now. Others avoided her, turned their eyes away, even spoke to Hannah as if she, Mary, were not occupying the same tent. As for the young children like Chaleb, they made their feelings well known by taunts and pebbles or anything else handy. It isn't fair, she whispered, resting her head upon her drawn-up knees. It isn't fair. And by the way, I'm outside. That's why you guys, I'm in my yard. I'm sorry if you hear a lot of cars, okay? At the sound of a familiar greeting, Mary raised her head. It was the Amorite who had escaped from the copper mines and joined the Hebrews as they fled Egypt. She answered gladly, the formal words of her homeland sweet to her tongue. In a few long strides, the man approached, threw his bundle of wood to the ground, and bowed his head politely. May I join you for a rest, niece of Pasear, the scribe? Mary's eyes widened in surprise. But how did you know who I was? She had seen the man before and knew from Hannah who he was, though she had never spoken to him. I am Manetto, youngest son of the tomb builder Thomtus. Though my mother was an Amorite, I could have stayed in Egypt and done quite well, except for the quarrel that left me disowned and in exile in the Pharaoh's copper mines. His tone was bitter. For a moment he paused, then went on speaking, his voice lighter now. You know, from listening to the talk, you serve an old midwife and are the niece of Pasear, the scribe, a former customer of Peleg, the Hebrew. Mary's face flushed. She should have stayed in Egypt. Here she was, a hated Egyptian, talked about so that even the stranger had even heard about her. A black ant crept to the edge of her robe, and she quickly flattened it with her palm. Manetto's large hand was even quicker. He picked up her small hand and held the bruised side onto the sunlight. So does the old woman beat you too? His black eyes, deep set between the thin eyebrows, searched her face piercingly. Mary was uncomfortable and snatched her hand away. No, Hannah does not beat me, she said. Her tongue stammered on the truth. It is only the young boys with their pebbles. They do not just talk like their mothers and fathers. She was sorry as soon as she said it, not wanting to confide in this man. Something sinister in his eyes frightened her. Manetto leaned in closer, his voice a steely whisper. Soon you will not have to worry about Hebrew slave children or their foolish parents. Mary looked at him, not understanding. Those of our number who left Egypt for a better life, not for some strange god, will soon leave behind this rabble of ex-slaves. Once we are safely to the north, our preparations finished, we will be on our way. Manetto placed a long finger under Mary's chin. You will say nothing of this to anyone, and when the time is right, you shall come with us, eh? Mary's heart beat wildly. She could not find words to say. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. There was Hannah, the young man, and Yahweh. Would it be better to leave with her own kind, even if it meant not knowing what lay ahead? Manetto was rising to leave. Remember, not a word must pass those pretty lips. It would be a shame to cut out such a lovely tongue. Ooh. He smiled, but the smile did nothing to soften his face. With a wave of his hand, he was gone. Mary stood up, looking about her frantically. The sheltering rock no longer seemed safe. She was no longer safe. A tiny cry rose inside of her and leapt from her lips. Yahweh, oh Yahweh, help me. Like a frightened deer, she ran back toward the camp, back to old Hannah. Okay. In the morning, Mary took her place beside Hannah's bent form on the plain before the mountain of Yahweh, as Moses had commanded. She trembled and clung to Hannah's arm. Hannah seemed in as much fear as Mary. Her quivering voice moaned in whispered prayer as she pressed against others, also groaning in awe. It was as if they stood, all of them, like small ants terrified by the storm hovering above them. Dense billows of smoke covered the mountaintop, yet it seemed to burn with flames beneath the cloud. Jagged streaks of lightning lit up the sky from one end to the other. Thunderclaps crashed with terrifying loudness. At the base of the mountain, a line of stones marked the boundary beyond which no man, woman, child, or beast could pass and live. Mary shuddered. Who would dare to move 1 foot closer to this terrible, awful day? Tirzah stood close to her mother and the rest of the women who clung together, their little ones clutched tightly by their hand or held in their arms. Beneath her feet, Tirzah felt the ground trembling. Ram's mouth hung open in utter amazement as he stood with his family. His father bowed his head and pressed Oren close to his chest. As Ram stared, the tones of a trumpet coming from somewhere near the mountain grew louder and louder. Men around him were praying, some even weeping, but Ram barely heard them as he listened to the sound like nothing he had ever heard before. All that Ram knew was that suddenly he was face down on the ground like the rest of the people around him. Only he had no longer heard any other voice. He was alone in the world. Yahweh had come and spoken. Later, Ram could never explain how he knew, nor did he try. What happened was simply that Yahweh was there, and he knew it. Moses alone had been called up to that mountain, and when he returned, he warned the people again not to step beyond the stones making the edge of the mountain, but to wait for the words of God. Ram would have waited for a lifetime if it needed be. He knew that he would never be the same after this. The next morning, Moses read the book of the covenant containing the words of the Lord to the people. This is Yahweh's promise. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. With one voice, the people responded, whatever the Lord has said, we shall do. Tears rolled down Mary's cheeks as she found herself repeating the promise to Yahweh. She would never desert him, no matter what the cost. Gently, she squeezed Hannah's old hand, and a smile lit up her face with love. Ram was among those those young men chosen to bring the bulls to the altar for sacrifice. His strong arms held the halter around the bull's neck firmly. Leading the animals skillfully to the priest who waited, knife in hand, the blood of the animals was caught in a large bowl. Their carcasses burnt. Some of the blood Moses took to pour upon the altar, the rest he sprinkled on the people as a sign of the covenant Yahweh had made with them. Overhead, the sky was clear now, the air still, as if no storm had ever broken its blueness. Only the top of the mountain remained hidden in the thick clouds. Tirzah sighed deeply as Aaron dismissed the crowds. Moses and his servant Joshua had gone up into the mountain once more, and the meeting was over. What was it like to see Yahweh, she wondered. Always and always she would remember that for one moment she too had heard his voice. There were no words to describe this, but she knew. Tirzah reached a hand to help her mother along the path. Her mother's face shone with happiness in spite of the deep dark circles beneath her eyes. It would be not long before the new baby came. On the outskirts of the camp, Mary saw Manetto sitting by a campfire with a half a dozen other strangers, none of them Hebrews. Had Manetto gone to the plain yesterday and today? She felt almost sure that he had not gone with the others, at least not today. How did his fire come to be so quickly ready? The pot of food already swinging above it when others were still returning home. She did not look long in his direction as she followed Hannah. Had he seen her? Were those piercing black eyes even upon her now? The thought worried her. Okay. Chapter 15, A Golden Idol. Chapter 15, A Golden Idol. Oren wiped a smudge of ink from his thumb, then carefully dipped the split tip of his reed into the water pot, touching it lightly to the dry ink. He drew another line on the papyrus stretched before him. Silently he counted. He had been right at the first time. It was 35 days since Moses had gone up into the mountain of God. Oren rocked back on his heels to think, what would he write next? Something was going on in the camp. He could not quite figure out what it was. His father returned from his meetings night after night with a grim look on his face. Across the room, his mother sighed. Oren watched her glance at the open tent flap, frown, and return to her work. She too was worried. Everywhere Oren went, he heard stories about the fate of Moses, who seemed to have disappeared. Some of them were as eerie as any of old Passier's tales had been. There was one talk of choosing new leaders. Where was Moses? Orrin wondered. This morning he had walked out to the mountain. Anyone could see that the clouds still sat covering its top. Maybe tomorrow Moses would return. He would be glad, and he would be glad to add that to his book of travels. His gift of ink from Passier was almost gone. Gently he stirred the small bit of thick sediment that was left. If only he had knew what to add that would keep the supply going. Passier had known. A picture of Passier sitting in his garden, papyrus in hand, passed through his mind. Would Mary know how to replenish the ink? Carefully he packed his tools away and picked up his crutch. He would find Mary and ask her. Sadly, Mary rubbed a bit of the ink between her thumb and forefinger. I know only that it was a metallic substance my uncle used to mix with charcoal. How or where he got it, I do not know. With the look of someone who had just had an idea, Mary wiped her fingers and reached for a piece of goat skin. You could use this for parchment. I can scrape the hair from the skin for you, and the ink for it is easy to make. Orrin fingered the goat skin. It would do. If the ink works, it will be fine, he said. Mary was already scraping away at the skin on her lap. All we need for the ink is right here, she said. One mixes charcoal and oil. Though the exact amount is important, it took a bit of doing, but by the time Orrin left, he was satisfied that the new ink would work. Mary watched him go, then hurried to pick up her water skin. Already the sun was beginning to weaken. No one would be at the water now. The shadows were lengthening as she finished filling the bag. She walked quickly, anxious not to be caught on the path in the dark. By now Hannah would be home and wondering about her. So she had spent too long with the boy. The sight of him had brought back bittersweet memories from the past. Her uncle had really loved the child. Without warning, Manetto interrupted her thoughts. Mary gasped as she stepped into the path no more than 3 feet ahead of her. Sorry, little one, sorry. I did not mean to startle you. Manetto held his hand palm up to gesture of apology. You were deep in thought and perhaps did not hear me coming. No, I didn't hear you, Mary answered, forcing a calmness that she did not feel into her voice. Please let me pass. I'm already late and I will be missed. Manetto stepped aside quickly so that she could go ahead. Go and fulfill your duties tonight as usual, but soon you will see who are the true masters. Mary's instinct was to hurry past him. Instead, she looked searchingly at him. I do not know what you mean, she said. Manetto smiled that peculiar cold smile Mary hated. The God of the Hebrews no longer sends his priest. He has tired of this rabble of slaves. It is time for the power of the old gods once more. Those of us who knew them best shall be their trusted servants. Mary shrank back from the man. Yahweh would never allow such a thing. Manetto grinned. What do you fear, daughter of Nut? Mary turned her eyes from his face. Nut was Egypt's goddess of the sky. Never fear, little one. Manetto will see that you are well treated. Now go before Khonsu rises and spots you. Mary hurried past him, not slowing her pace, not stopping to look back. Khonsu was the moon god. She had heard stories of his affairs, none of them pleasing to her. This talk of the old gods in the camp of Yahweh frightened her. Above her the moon was indeed rising, and Mary stumbled in her haste, splashing a bit of the water over her sandals. As she straightened and steadied the water skin, she saw the shining cloud of Yahweh still above the mountain beyond the camp. Yahweh's watch over his people, she thought inside. Whether for relief or wonder at the great mystery of Yahweh, she didn't know. Ahead, the light of Hannah's campfire welcomed her with dancing yellow brightness. 2 days later, Mary, her hands bound tightly behind her back, wept bitterly with longing for old Hannah and her welcoming campfire. Everywhere fires of rebellion burned in the camp. People seemed to have gone mad. Huge bonfires flamed far into the night while men and women danced about them wildly, some of them drunkenly. Women prepared food as for a great feast, and people donned their finest clothing. At the remote eastern edge of the camp, the strangers among the Hebrews had their tents. There, Mary sat on the ground before Manetto's tent, watching the madness. Is this happening in all of the camp? She wondered. It was no use to struggle. Her wrists burned where the twisted vines binded them rubbed into her skin. If only she could free her hands, she could untie her feet from the stake Manetto had driven into the ground. The thought of his cruel smile made her squirm with anger. She had fought against his powerful grip, tooth and nail. Why had she gone again for water late in the evening when there was no one to help her? She should have known after Manetto's first visit that something like this could happen. She had seen the look of surprise, then anger on Manetto's face when she refused to go with him. I follow Yahweh now. Can't you see? There is his cloud still on the mountain, she said, pointing. For a minute, Manetto had hesitated. So you still think safety lies with these slaves? I will soon convince you how wrong you are. And then you will serve me, little sister. He carried her off like a sack of grain, ignoring her struggles, one large hand covering her mouth. Mary licked her dry lips. All that was changed now. Manetto no longer tried to reason with her. There was no need now that the whole camp was bent on finding a new god to lead them. Manetto could choose a wife from those women who seemed to hang on his every word. They followed him about as if he were a god. This afternoon, 2 of them had painted her face and dressed her in garlands of flower. You must be beautiful for the new god, one of them said. What new god? I belong to Yahweh, Mary cried out. The women had laughed. Just be patient, the others said. Soon you will see our new god. He is all golden. You'll love him. You'll see. The woman's voice was wobbly, her breath sour with the smell of wine. When they left, Mary wished she had begged them for a drink of water. Her face felt dry and heavy with pain, and her throat ached from the sobs and the wrench that wrenched her. They would come for her when the sun set to take her to the new god. Horror filled her mind. If only Manetto would return before then, she would promise him anything to escape. The light was beginning to change, and he had still not come. Oh, help me, Yahweh. Please help me, she prayed. Nothing moved among the deserted tents. From somewhere on the north side of the camp, sounds of revelry carried on in the air. Mary closed her burning eyes. She had fallen asleep. Was that Ram coming towards her? It was Ram. Oh, help me, Ram, help me, she cried. It really is you, Ram asked. What have they done to you? Without waiting for an answer, he went to work on the vines that had bound Mary's feet. We've been looking everywhere for you for 2 days, ever since Hannah couldn't find you. This was the last place I thought to look. It was just a chance idea that made me come here. Mary held Ram's arm for a moment as she stood on her cramped legs. I would not leave Yahweh, but Manetto brought me here thinking he would persuade me. They want to sacrifice me to their new god. She tore the garlands from her neck. Oh, Ram, what will we do? The marked and painted face of Mary was eerie, but Ram could see fear in her eyes. We run, he said, taking her hand, and he headed west. Mary ran for her life, and the blood coming back into her feet and legs like sharp knives. My father and some of the others have gone into the hills west of camp, Ram said, his breath coming hard. He and Molid went down to the camp to reason, but they were outnumbered by the mobs. When the violence began, those who feared Yahweh fled to the hills. We'll be safe there. Ram glanced behind him as they ran. Any moment they could pursue us. They needed to reach cover. In a thick shelter of rocks, they stopped to rest. It's not far now, Ram assured Mary as he leaned his back against a rock. They had reached the first hill, and Ram could not see a sign of anyone following them. Mary sat down on the rock and let her head droop against her drawn-up knees. Suddenly, she began to rub her face with both hands. Jumping up, she looked about frantically. Ram sat up in alarm. "I can't see anyone." Uh-oh. I can't let anyone see me like this," Mary said half to herself. The small... we're having issues with our cat, guys. Okay. He's starting to start some trouble here. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink. Okay. Where did I leave off? Okay. "I can't let anyone see me like this," Mary said half to herself. The small white flowers of a nearby broom bush caught her eye. Shh. Hey. In a moment, she was tearing off handfuls of sweet, fragrant blooms to wipe the thick paint from her skin. When she finished, she was once more the plain-faced Mary that Ram knew, her face red from the rubbing, but clean. As they approached the small plateau, well hidden from the valley below, Tirzah ran from one of the tents to meet them. Impulsively, she threw her arms around Mary. "You found her," she cried out. Standing back from Mary, Tirzah searched the girl's face. "You are all right, aren't you, Mary?" she asked. Mary could not control the tears that ran down her cheeks. "I'm safe. I could not go with Manetto and the others because I promised to follow Yahweh. They were going to give me to their new God." She covered her eyes for a moment, then went on, "Oh, Tirzah, I prayed to Yahweh for help, and then Ram came. Some of the women gathered around, and now kind hands gently led Mary towards the tents." Tirzah stayed behind with Ram. "Where did you find her, Ram?" Ram sat down on the ground, suddenly tired. She was in the entryway to Manetto's tent, tied to the stake in the ground and dressed for sacrifice to the new god. He remembered Mary's strangely painted face, the garlands of flowers, the clothing, he shuddered to think of what might have been. Tirzah put a hand on Ram's shoulder. "Whatever comes, Ram, I'm glad you are my brother." Ram looked at his sister, her slim frame and the bright intelligence of her eyes, so like their father's. "It's going to be all right, Tiz. We'll stick together," he said. "Look, Ram, up there." Tirzah pointed to the top of the great mountain, rising above all the other hills. "See, Yahweh's cloud is still there." Ram stared at the clouds, glowing with fiery light as the night came on. "We must just wait and see, Tiz. Wait and see." During the second watch of the night, Ram took his turn along with Abishur and his uncle Caleb, watching the narrow pass to the plateau. From the valley, they could hear the shouts of the music of all the celebration. "It's a terrible thing that they do," his uncle said quietly. "The people laid their earrings and necklaces at Aaron's feet and got him to melt them down." His uncle's voice trembled. What came from the fire was evil in the shape of a bull calf. Now they are calling it the God who brought them out of Egypt. Ram shivered in the cold night air. In the far distance, Yahweh's clouds still glowed about the mountaintop. "Yahweh brought us up out of Egypt," he said, "and I will stand against any man who says otherwise." His uncle patted his arm, and Abishur's too. "Good lads, both of you. We will watch sharp this night. Yahweh is not done with his people, though I fear his anger will fall on many." The night passed slowly till it was the third watch, and Ram gladly gave his place to his father and Mulad. Wearily, he stumbled back into the tent, flung himself down, and was asleep instantly. In the nearby tent, Mary snuggled close to old Hannah, who slept peacefully with a smile on her face. "She was glad that I am back," thought Mary. Tenderly, she pulled the robe up about Hannah's shoulders. Hannah would never let Manetto take her. A nagging fear rose to taunt her, but she shut her eyes tightly and let herself drift into sleep. Okay. Chapter 16. One Small Miracle. Tirzah awoke from sleep to the sound of birds singing in the acacia trees close to the tent. Lazily she kept her eyes shut, only to open them instantly as a cry burst out into the morning stillness. Moses is coming down from the mountain. Joshua is with them. Hurry! Tirzah was up instantly. Leaving everything behind them, the entire camp ran to meet the leader. Tirzah and her mother were hurrying when her mother gasped and stood still. Her hand tightened on Tirzah's shoulder. It's no use, her mother said. I can't make it. She had already turned pale as she stood and bent over with pain. Tirzah felt her stomach knot and a chill run down her spine. Jeraheel, you must go down with Ram and Oren along with the others. Tirzah and I will stay here, her mother said, gasping for breath. Tirzah, run and catch Jeroth quickly. I will not leave you here alone, my love, Jeraheel said firmly as he placed a strong arm about his wife to support her. Bring Jeroth and Ram. See that you stay with your uncle Caleb. Oren, stick with your brother. I will come when I can. When Tirzah came running with Jeroth, her mother was already inside the tent. Gently, Jeroth touched Tirzah's arm. Tirzah, you must keep the fire going and wait for me outside the tent. She patted Tirzah and quickly went inside, closing the tent flap behind her. Tirzah stirred the fire and tended it till it glowed brightly once again. She sat back on her heels and listened for any sound within the tent. Would the baby be all right? Would her mother suffer much? Her eyes filled with tears. She felt suddenly alone in this big world. When her father returned with an armful of wood for the fire, she looked up at him. Father, will she die? In one great stride, her father scooped her up in his arms like a little child, letting her burrow her head into his strong shoulders. Yahweh is good. Whatever he wills is right. Now, little bird, you must wait patiently as I did when you were born, and before that with Ram, and once again with Oren. You and I can do nothing to hurry the coming of a little one. They make their entrance in their own time. He sat her down and dried her eyes with the edge of his robe. There is something I want you to do, he said. A little while ago I fed the goats, and I have not seen such a sight as that donkey's hide in a long time. How about grooming her? He smiled down at Tirzah. You are the only one she will allow near her long enough to do a good job. Tirzah hesitated, looking toward the tent, and then to the far side of the hill where the animals were. Her father shook his head. Come on now. You must not worry. I will be here with your mother. These things take a long time. I promise to call you. Now go. Impulsively, she kissed her father's large sun-browned hand. You are a good father, she whispered, and without looking up, ran gratefully to tend Sorry. All morning she commanded and cajoled, trying to get Sorry to cooperate. You'd better not try that again, she said, rubbing her shoulder where Sorry had nipped her. Sorry turned his head away as she had no idea what Tirzah meant. Twice the donkey had sent Tirzah backwards, combs and all, while she deliberately rolled herself in the dust. At noon, her father brought her food. There was no news yet, but now Tirzah had something to give Sorry for a bribe. Within the hour, she finished the job, leaving Sorry clean and contentedly munching the last of Tirzah's bread. By the time her father came again, Tirzah had braided the silky hair of 2 goats, decorated the baby goats with broom brush flowers, which they ate, and was thinking of what to do with the ram. One glance at her father's face told her that something was wrong. He looked strained and weary, as if the strength had drained from him. His eyes were far away for a moment before he spoke. The child is a girl, a small one. Jeratho thinks it will yet be well with her, but it is too soon to tell. And mother, how is mother? Tirzah asked. Perhaps the trouble of these last days, the hardness of the journey, I don't know. She is very tired. It has been a long day. I will call you as soon as Jeratho says that you may see her. Tirzah had taken his hand in hers and held it tightly. He looked at her gently. We must both pray. Yahweh's will is best. Tirzah watched him go, her heart too heavy to pray. At sunset, the others returned for one more night in the little camp. Tirzah sat outside the tent, still waiting for her father and Jeritho to call her inside where her mother lay so ill. Ram and Oren sat huddled close together by the fire, their faces full of grief. Benj and Reuben had come to hear the news and gone quietly away with their father to their own tent. Old Hannah was with her mother too, and Mary sat like a small shadow at the edge of a firelight, waiting for her. Slowly stopping to choose his words carefully, Ram told them what had taken place in the camp below. Moses was so angry that he broke the tablets of stone from Yahweh, crying out to the people were not worthy of them. Then he had Joshua grind up the golden calf and sprinkle the powder on the water. He made the people drink the bitter water to remind them of Yahweh's wrath. Ram paused to brush a fly from his face. I can barely tell you what happened next. Moses called for those who were for the Lord to stand by him. There were many beside us, mostly Levites. Ram cleared his throat. But it was the Levites with their swords that Moses commanded to go back and forth through the camp, slaying brother, friend, and neighbor who had not come to the Lord's side. Ram stopped. Tirzah lifted her head to look at him with amazement. Then that was the terrible noise we heard today. Father said it must have, oh sorry, a bug just went on me. Father said it must have something to do with Yahweh's punishment when Moses saw that what the people were doing. Scenes of the wounded from the Amalekite raid flashed before her, but this killing in the camp, she could not picture. Ram shook his head as if to clear it. Never have I ever heard or seen anything like this. Tonight there is mourning all over the camp. I can hardly believe what has happened, and we are spared. He looked at Mary. Manetto also is dead. From the shadows where she sat, Mary spoke quietly. Yahweh is very great. He could have punished us all. In Egypt, the priests did not teach about the mercy of gods, only their terrible anger. Oren nodded in agreement. Right. Anyone could see that Yahweh's clouds still covered the mountain. They should have waited for Moses. He was interrupted by his father's appearance in the doorway of the tent. Every face turned expectantly. Your mother is sleeping peacefully, thanks be to Yahweh. A sigh of relief escaped from Tirzah's lips, only to leave her heart beating wildly at the unasked question, what of the baby? As if he had heard, her father nodded his head. The child too sleeps, and if Yahweh wills, she shall live. Tomorrow we will see them. Tirzah felt as if a fresh breeze swept over her. Tomorrow she would see her new sister. Her mother was all right. Moses had returned, and life will go on. All would be well. Tirzah, Ram said, breaking into her thoughts. There is something else I must tell you. Our uncle Shobal is dead. He died at the hand of the Levite neighbor. Tirzah's heart jumped. Abishur? What about Abishur? Abishur as well. Jonathan too. Only their father is dead, Ram answered, but they grieve for their father. Yes, Tirzah whispered, they must be grieving for their father. She too would mourn for him, for the uncle she had known as a child. He had been good to her in spite of all of his shortcomings. The night air felt chill, and Tirzah pulled her mantle closer. Oh, Uncle Shobal, why did you go against Yahweh? She mourned. The sound of a tiny cry like a kitten came from inside the tent, reminding Tirzah of the new life, the little sister she had always wanted. In spite of her sadness for Abishur's family, a warm, soft feeling flowed over her as she listened to the baby crying. Okay, let me take a little sip of water. We're getting there, guys. Yeah. Okay, you're fine. Chapter 17, Hannah. No one had left the small camp in the hills. On the following day, Joshua had come with news of a plague in the camp. The sickness was everywhere, fever and boils. For some, death came quickly. Until it was over, Joshua advised them to stay where they were. Only Hannah offered to go down to the camp and nurse the sick. Reluctantly, Joshua gave in to the old woman and waited for her to gather her medicines. Inside the tent, Mary fell to her knees before Hannah. "Please, my mother, do not go down, I beg you," she pleaded. "Surely Yahweh has sent this plague as a punishment. Do not go, I beg you." Gently, Hannah pried the girl's hands from her robe. "Now, child, Yahweh may punish those who do wrongly, but when a man or a woman is down sick, we must not add to their suffering but by refusing to help. Yahweh has given us herbs and plants to use for good for all. I must use my skill wherever it is needed." Hannah turned and reached for her potions, placing each packet carefully into her bag. Mary rose to her feet. "I want to go with you and help you," she insisted. "No, child, I cannot expose you to these sicknesses." Hannah spun around to face Mary, her eyes softening as they sought the girl's. "You are young with all life before you. I have lived a long life. I am ready to go. Now let me get on with my packing, or young Joshua will grow weary of waiting for me." "Please let me go with you," Mary begged. "I'm strong. I know how to mix the medicines for you. You will need me." Once more, she grasped Hannah's arm tightly. "Don't you see, Mother, I cannot let you go alone. Take me with you, and I will serve those Yahweh has stricken too." Hannah's eyes filled with tears as she patted Mary's hand. "You are a precious daughter to me. Come then, if you will." "Get your things quickly." Relieved, Mary threw her arms about Hannah's neck and hugged her. Mary was not prepared for the stench of the sickness that fouled the air as soon as they entered the first tent. Hannah bent over a woman and child, both burning with fever. The woman's body was covered with boil-like sores that oozed. The child had a few angry red sores that had not yet broken. Hannah showed Mary how to make compresses and apply them. Softly, Mary laid a wet cloth on the child's chest. She touched the little one's forehead, smoothing the dark hair from her face. As she did, the child opened her eyes wearily, then closed them again. Mary went on cooling the fevered body with water mixed with fever herbs. When Hannah came to dose the child, Mary lifted the hot head and held it while Hannah administered the medicine. Hannah wiped the last sore clean and laid a compress on the mother's chest. She had done all she could, at most making the woman more comfortable. With a sigh, she motioned for Mary to come and lifted the tent flap. All Hannah's skill would not save the mother, but perhaps the child yet would live. Outside the tent, a neighbor woman waited for them, a look of woe on her face. "Both her sons and her husband are gone. What will the poor things do?" she wailed. Hannah handed her a small jar of medicine. "Mix 1 part of the medicine with 2 parts of water and give them each a dose at sunset. If the woman lives, do it again, and in the morning," Hannah said. "Mercy on us all. Then the poor woman will not live," the woman cried. "It is not likely," Hannah replied. "I don't even know if the child will survive. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do here, and others are waiting." Abruptly, Hannah followed a young girl who stood ready to guide her to her family's tent, where the rest of the family lay stricken. As Mary walked behind them, she wondered if the child would live, and if it did, who would care for it, the tiny little thing. They had taken no time to rest or eat, and already the sun was going down. Wearily, Mary stumbled from the last tent into the dimmering light. Behind her, Hannah lingered to watch. I'm sorry, I missed my place. Behind her, Hannah lingered to watch an old man cough and wipe the blood from his chin. It seemed endless to Mary, tent after tent filled with people who lay ill to help themselves or even move. When Hannah finally came, Mary silently took her bag together. They went to the tent Joshua had set aside for them. Long before the light of dawn, Hannah was up heating water and mixing fresh portions of herb medicines. Mary bit her lip as she struggled from a deep sleep. She wanted to scold Hannah and tell her that she must rest. Instead, she crawled slowly from the blanket into the cold pre-dawn air. When they were out of medicine, Hannah sent Joshua for more. In the other parts of the camp, other women like Hannah worked as she did to save who they could. There were just too many sick people, too few to help, and the little that could be done for the desperately ill. Each day of the death toll mounted. Mary wanted to shut her ears and the sounds of the wailing mourners and close her eyes to the sight of the oozing sores and the dying flesh. Sorry, I'm just seeing. On the 5th day, there were no more cases for Hannah to treat. On the 7th day, there were no more deaths. As people grew better, they helped one another. It was over, and Hannah was no longer needed. At last, they could return to their own tent. Mary watched while Hannah rested. They had only gone up a little way up the hill when Hannah stopped the first time. Her breath came in little gasps. "I'll be all right in a minute, child. Just a minute of rest," Hannah had said. She had been better, or it seemed. Now Mary was frightened. Hannah's pale face was shining with cold sweat. Her body sagged heavily like a partly filled sack of grain. She sat on the ground, leaning her head against her drawn-up knees. When Mary sat at her feet, Hannah looked up with the eyes encircled by dark shadows. "You are worn out," Mary said. "I should have not let you climb this hill until you rested another day." Her hands chafed Hannah's cold ones. "Rest now, and I will watch till you wake," she said. Hannah smiled weakly and let Mary ease her gently back onto the ground, her head against Mary's bundle. "You are a good child. Yahweh is good. I am an old woman who should know better than I do what things an old body can do." She closed her eyes and murmured, "You rest. I will rest while you watch." Mary did not know when Hannah had slipped quietly away. It must have been after she had made a little shelter over Hannah's head to shield her from the sun. Time passed, but Mary could not tell how much or when. She sat holding the old hand in hers, feeling the stiffness that was already setting in. She was still sitting, holding Hannah's lifeless hand when the twins found her. She saw them and she heard them, but it was as if they were outside her world. She was a shadow. They were real. When Benj tried to loosen her hold on Hannah's hand, she pushed him away with her other hand. They were pleading with her, but if she had a voice, she did not know where it had gone. There was nothing to say. They must have gone away, because for a long while she just sat in the stillness. The sun beat down on her, making the shadow that she was feel its scorching fury. She could not feel anything else, only the heat. Egyptians feel heat, she thought. If Yahweh sent the sun, then it must be good. If Yahweh sends his son to me, why do Yahweh's children throw stones? They had hurt her, those little boys with those stones. Now there was no place for her to go. Her head felt as if a hot knife were cutting into it. She was puzzled. Were there two of her? One an Egyptian? Who was the other one? She tried to see past the dizzying heat that blinded her. Someone was holding her head to keep her from drowning. She could feel the cold water closing over her body and a voice crying out in pain. With pain. Jethro placed a cooling cloth on Mary's forehead. Tirzah, wincing as Mary cried out, continued to wipe the girl's arms and chest with a mixture of water and fever herb. "Her forehead feels a bit cooler now to me," Jethro said softly. "I think the fever's coming down." Sitting back on her heels, she watched Tirzah. "My little bird, I do believe that you have the heart of a healer. You have been bathing her for hours now. Shall I let you rest a while?" Tirzah paused for a moment to reply, "No thanks. I really love helping. Besides, I let her rest often. The water feels so cold to her skin that she cries out when it touches her." Tirzah smoothed the light cover across Mary's chest. "At least there is no sign of plague, just fever," she said. Jeroth took the cloth that was beginning to warm and replaced it with a cool one. "No, I do not think there is any danger of plague. The child was in the sun too long, probably worn out with grief and hard work in the camp." Tirzah nodded her head in agreement. "Poor old Hannah. Joshua said she saved the lives of many." A tear rolled down Tirzah's cheek, and she brushed it away quickly. "I'll miss her, dear old thing. I wish she could have gone all the way to the promised land, don't you?" Jeroth's eyes were full, a look of tender love on her face. "Yes, little bird, I will miss her too. But I think she has already gone to the promised land." Tirzah thought of Moses' words at the funeral. High above the mourners, a lone bird had caught her attention, watching it circle, then hang floating in the air before it flew off toward the west. She'd heard only snatches of Moses' prayer, but those lines had settled in her memory. She could hear them now. Yahweh, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting you are God. Tirzah held the damp cloth lightly as her lips formed the words, satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing of joy and be glad of your days. Maybe for Hannah it was like morning. The thought was too big to hold for long. Mary stirred, and Tirzah placed the cloth against Mary's forehead. Though it seemed somehow right for Hannah to die in an old age, Tirzah did not want Mary to follow her. Okay. Hi, guys. Okay, chapter 18, Benja's Stone. How could sheep be so dumb? Ram pulled the thick black thorn from the side of his hand and put the stinging hand to his mouth. At his feet on the floor of the dry wadi, a fat sheep stood nosing about for food. It was covered with dust and bits of thorn bush tangled in the curly wool, but none the worse for its wandering off from the others. For an hour Ram had searched for it, at last hearing its silly bleating. With a swish of his rod, he drove it along the gully bottom, back toward the flock he had left behind with Reuben. It was hot, and Ram could feel the sweat running down his back. The sheep must have slid its way into the wadi and then continued walking in to have come so far. He brushed a brown lizard from his path and watched it slip quickly into a crevice. The sheep took no notice, stopping when he stopped, moving on when he moved. At a bend in the wadi, the sheep bounded out of sight, and Ram hurried after it, only to stop short at the sight in front of him. It was Abishur. He was sitting on a flat stone under the overhanging bank of the stream. For a minute they both stared at each other. It had been a week since the funeral, but Abishur still had not spoken a word about his father's death. Now Abishur gestured to another stone. Be my guest, he said. Ram sat down. How long have you been out here? He asked. Abishur picked up his flute, but put it down again. Oh, no more than an hour or two. I left the flock with Jonathan. He is the practical one, anyway. Abishur's voice was bitter. Practical, wasn't that what they called my father? Ram was silent. Abishur put his flute to his mouth, and this time played a mournful tune, one Ram had heard before. I wasn't there when he died, you know. Jonathan was with him, but not me. I was up in these hills, safe and secure. You couldn't have helped him anyhow, Ram said. Your father was a leader. The Levites knew that. I'm sorry. He believed he was right. You couldn't have changed that. Abishur picked up a small stone and sent it dashing along the wadi bottom. I didn't try. Maybe if I had tried to help him, something would have changed. Abishur turned his head away from Ram. Ram reached out a hand to his cousin. Look, if it's any help, I know something about guilt. I once followed your father and Jonathan without question. If Yahweh hadn't done a miracle at the sea that day, we might have died together fighting the Egyptians. Abishur made no sign that he had heard, and Ram withdrew his hand. Listen, I know you feel that you failed him somehow. I felt that way too, like I had failed my own father, and Moses and Yahweh too. The sheep nuzzled between Ram's feet, and he pushed it away. Do you know what I mean, Abishur? Abishur answered quietly, I know what you are getting at, but there is a difference. My father is dead. Yours is alive. Ram bowed his head in his hands because it was true. At least he had been given a second chance. How could he help his friend, his cousin? Only Yahweh knows what might have been, he said. You did what was right before Yahweh. Can a man do more? A deep groan wrenched Abishur as if it had come from the soles of his feet. When we were little, he loved us. He was good to us. His voice broke as he whispered, I loved him. I would have died for him. Like a brother, Ram held Abishur's shaking frame close. When his sobs quieted, Ram sat quietly by. Their words were few, but after a while, Ram knew that Abishur was ready to return. Together they rose and they headed toward the camp. Halfway there, Benj met them. The hides of 3 conies strung on a stick across his shoulder. The conies were full grown, with long black whiskers and broad nails on each toe for digging. They were not much larger than rabbits and had hard to catch. How did Benj manage 3 at once? Proudly, Benj pointed to the conies. Good eating, he said. Ram admired the black and brown skins, highly valued for their durability. Benj looked questioningly at Ram. Want to trade? 3 skins for a goat skin? Ram laughed. Thanks. I wish I could, but all our spare skins have gone to be used on the new tabernacle. Moses had received instructions for making each part of the tabernacle, walls, roof, and furnishings. Every day the people brought gifts to be used for the building. Ram had given his arms bands to be melted down for their copper. He had been amazed at the heaps of gold, silver, copper, colored yarns, goat skins, and sea cow skins piling up for the work ahead. Benj turned to Abishur. Before he could ask, Abishur answered, Ours too? Sorry. Come back in about a month and we'll see. Benj grunted, hoisting his catch higher on his shoulder. You are quite the hunter, Abishur said, fingering one of the pelts. It was true. Conies lived in a group of 50 or more, with a system of guard conies who whistled out a warning to approach of danger. A hunter would have to be quick to catch even one before they scurried into the rocks. Benj fell into step with the others. He was proud of his catch. It had been a good day. Conies weren't all that he had found. He said nothing of the big bag tied to his belt. Tied him enough for that later, after he had shown them to Tirzah. As they entered the camp, Abihail joined them. Ever since the funeral, she kept turning up with little offerings of sympathy. She was still bringing honey cakes, though they seemed to be meant for more for Abishur than the rest of the family. This time she held out a small bowl, a bit of stew, she said lightly. I made it myself. I hope you like it. Her long lashes fluttered shyly. Abishur smiled, taking the bowl from her hands. It was small, just enough for one person. I'm sure my mother will love it, he teased. Instantly her eyes grew wide with shock. But he continued, if you don't mind, I'm starving and shall eat it myself. Blushing, Abihail laughed her silvery laugh. Ram grinned and thumbed his cousin's shoulders heartily. Some people have all the breaks, he said, turning to Abihail. He made a small mock bow. Fair one. Should you desire to have another test your cooking skills, I am at your service. Before he could duck, Abihail gave a strong pull to his headpiece. I do not cook for bears, she said, turning to run lightly away. She did not stop to chat with Tirzah, who was just coming to where the little group stood. Tirzah put down her empty basket and ran her fingers lightly over the coney skins. Abishur and Ram were already on their way to the tents. Tirzah looked up to see Benj staring at her, his dark eyes dancing with flecks of light. Nice, eh? He said. Tirzah only nodded and picked up a long set of whiskers hanging from one of the hides. Benj fished in the pouch at his belt with his free hand. I have something else to show you, Tiz. Look. In his hand was a large, flat stone. Tirzah took the stone, curious to inspect the grooves she saw imprinted on its side. Why, it's a fish, the whole body of a fish. Right, bones and all, Benj said, and see there on the side a seashell embedded in the rock. Where in the world did you find it? Tirzah asked. Ben scratched his head as he answered. That's the funny part. You can tell that the shell got caught in the rock somehow, and I think that the fish did too. It's so perfect. What I'd like to know is, how did that rock get attached to the top of a hill in the middle of the desert? Tirzah held the whitish rock carefully, turning it on one way, then another. What will you do with it? She asked. Benj looked surprised. Didn't you know? It's yours, of course. Now it was Tirzah's turn to be surprised. I shouldn't keep it, Benj. It's too wonderful. She held the rock in both hands, watching it, yet unsure what to do. Benj settled the matter. Take it. I meant for you to have it. Besides, there are probably others. Next time I go hunting up there, I'm going to look around for more. They had begun walking slowly toward the camp. Tirzah with the rock in her basket. Benj kept the coney skins on the shoulder farthest from Tirzah. Already they were beginning to smell badly and would get worse before they were cured. All evening, Tirzah kept the rock a secret. When everyone was seated around the fire, she brought it out and passed it around. When it came to Molid, he looked at it for a long while. "This is a sign," he said finally, glancing at Benj, "a sign of the great flood that was once covered the hill and left this behind until you found it today, son." Her father spoke up from the shadows of the fire. "I have heard Moses tell the story of our ancestor Noah and the great flood, but it would please me to hear it again. Molid, if you would tell it." When Molid finished, a feeling like awe and peace mixed together filled Tirzah's mind. How great Yahweh was. Okay, chapter 19, A New Way. From where she sat in the small circle of students, Tirzah could see the molted skin on the teacher's hand as he held his teaching stick. She tried to listen to the words so that she could repeat them with others. It was all new, so wonderful, learning the words from Yahweh. She could not imagine what life was like before. Not everyone must learn the commandments, now everyone must learn the commandments, even the children. The teacher's stick rapped for attention. "Repeat after me," he said, "everyone together. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name." Tirzah said the words hastily at first, then louder along with the others, voices raised in unison with the teacher's. "Good, good," the teacher commanded them. "Now go on along home and remember your lessons." Tirzah walked slowly. It was already hot, and the sky above her brilliant blue was a brilliant blue except for a cloud of Yahweh hanging low in the distance. Right above the new tabernacle, it was always there. When the cloud moved, Moses said they would follow it as before. Tirzah tried to picture how it would be. First, the newly built ark of Yahweh, beautiful and so holy that only the priests could bear it on special carrying poles. Then the tabernacle with all its parts carried by the Levites. And at last the people would come marching by tribes behind the leaders. It was such a glorious picture in Tirzah's mind that she imagined that she could hear the new silver trumpet sounding the call, but it was only Abishur striding along the path, playing a lively song on his flute. She waited for him to catch up. Taking the flute from his lips, he smiled his old smile with his sun-browned skin. He was handsomer than ever. Tirzah fell into step beside him. "That's a new song," she said. "I like it." "A new song for a new day, Tiz. A hot one," Tirzah commented. The sun was almost directly above them. "That's not exactly what I meant," Abishur said. "Everything's changed, Tiz. We are a nation now, the people of the covenant. We have the laws of Yahweh for living rightly. It's a whole new way of life, a good one." A stone wedged itself in Tirzah's sandal, and she stopped to pick it out. She hadn't thought of all those things, and she liked the sound of the people of the covenant. "I know," she said. "Today we learn the commandment to honor our father and our mother so that we may enjoy long life in a promised land." Immediately she was sorry she mentioned it to Abishur. I didn't mean to make you think of your father," she said weakly. "It's okay, Tiz. I'm over all that now." His tone was calm and quiet. "Besides, we learn the same commandments of Yahweh in our group." Abishur and the older boys met separately with one of the elders. They had come to the dividing of the paths, and Abishur stood for a minute, looking at Tirzah. "Don't ever grow up, Tiz," he said, with a light tap of his flute on the tip of her nose. He left her. His remarks stung her. She was not a child, and just because he was a cousin was no reason for him to treat her like one. Under her breath, Tirzah muttered, "And I suppose you're a grown-up." It made no sense even as she said it. Striding down the path and playing his flute, Abishur couldn't hear her anyway. She wished he had. Abihal was hardly older than she was. Let him try telling her she's a child. She stormed into the tent just as little Deborah woke from her nap. Her blue eyes were open wide, and she smiled and cooed as she recognized Tirzah. Her tiny arms reached out to be picked up. Tirzah felt all her hostility melt away before this perfect little sister. "You dear, you little precious love," she crooned softly. When Leah entered the tent and saw her two girls together, pride and love swelled within her. Yahweh is so good, she thought, putting down her bundle of bitter herbs for the coming Passover. On exactly the first day of this first month of the second year since they had left Egypt, the whole camp celebrated the Passover. This time there was no fear of dark night outside, no anxious thoughts about the morning or the flight to freedom. Joy filled the tent as the solemn ceremony was performed. Tirzah did not bother to hide her tears when Oren said the prepared words in answer to their father's question, "Do you know the meaning of this night?" Proudly, Tirzah held the newest member of the family on her lap and whispered, "See, this is your family. Aren't you glad?" After the Passover days ended, there were more lessons. Abihail rarely waited for Tirzah these days. From the corner of her eye, Tirzah saw her red gold head bent down together with a group of older girls, all of whom were marriageable age and talked of nothing else. "Hi, waiting for someone?" Ephon, cheerful as usual, caught up with Tirzah. "No, just thinking," Tirzah replied. Now that she had the chance, there was something about that she wanted to ask Ephon. "Mind if I walk with you?" Ephon's round face looked pleased. "I need to the company," she said. For a while they walked in silence. Tirzah was in no hurry, and Ephon didn't even seem to be either. "Ephon, I did want to ask you something," Tirzah said. How did you do that this morning? I mean, you were the only one who had those long commandments down perfectly." Her own attempt to recite them had been painfully poor. Shyly, Ephon glanced at Tirzah. "If you really want to know," she said, "it was easy. I made it all into a little song last night so I could remember it." Tirzah grinned. The idea was a good one. "Ephon, do you think I could learn that way too?" "Why don't you try?" Ephon offered, her eyes alight with pleasure. They walked as far as they could together, Ephon singing the lines and Tirzah repeating them. At the parting of the path, Tirzah reluctantly went on alone. She liked Ephon. How was it that she hadn't known that before? The fact that the girl worked like a son for her father and seemed shy didn't mean anything. She was strong, that was something. And she was keen, and her voice was really rich and sweet. As she passed the doorway of Jerohoth's tent, Mary, a cheerful smile on her face, waved to her. The fever had left her weak. Tirzah knew that she still mourned for Hannah, though she never complained. Some people still slighted Mary because she was Egyptian. Sorry. Tirzah's chin went up resolutely. No one would say a word against Mary while she was around. She waved back heartily. Naaloth and Makkah had come to see the baby. Naaloth picked Deborah up and held her in her arms. Makkah kneeled by them, cooing and clucking like a mother bird. Tirzah was the envy of both girls, since the youngest in their household was 11 years old. When Deborah squeezed her eyes shut and began to wail loudly, her mother took her from Naaloth's arms with a sigh. "Time to nurse her again. One of these days you will have your own babe to care for," she said, looking directly at Naaloth. "Or do the rumors I hear count for nothing?" Naaloth blushed. "What can I say, Aunt Leah? You know how people talk." Naaloth was the oldest girl, already of marriageable age. The matchmakers lost no time trying to find suitors as soon as the girls were ready, and Naaloth was no exception. Tirzah grinned, thinking of the work the aunts would make of it, and all the while Naaloth had eyes only for one, Haran, son of Peleg. But so far, Haran, the hunter, seemed to care for nothing but his bow, sharpening his arrows and hunting. How in the world would he ever marry someone like Naaloth, who was so squeamish? Tirzah had seen her retch at the sight of a dead coney covered with flies. The sudden sound of the trumpet silenced them all. It lasted for several minutes, clear, high notes filling the air, then dying away to stillness. Tirzah looked at her mother, who nodded. "Yes, it's the call to prepare for the march. We are moving again," she said. "Come, there is much to do." Naaloth and Makkah left hastily, and Tirzah followed her mother inside. She went first to the rock Benj had given her, wrapped it closely inside her best clothes, and began packing. So Naaloth would escape the aunts for a while longer, and a thought entered her mind and found its way to her lips. "Mother, when Ram is ready to marry, do you think Mary will be the one?" Her mother's back stiffened. Her voice was unsteady. "What gave you such an idea?" Before Tirzah could even answer, she went on. "The girl is a good enough girl, but she has no family, no background. She is also a full-blooded Egyptian." "But she loves Yahweh," Tirzah protested. "And now that Jeroth has given her to live, now that Gerald has taken her to live with them, she really isn't alone anymore. Her mother turned to face her with flashing eyes. I don't know what put such things in your head. I don't want to hear another word about it. When the time comes, Ram's wife will be chosen. Tirzah was quick to see the shadow of pain, or was it something else that passed over her mother's face? It isn't fair, she thought. What if I'd been Mary and it was me Ram loved? She knew how her brother looked at Mary, how Mary brightened whenever he was near. Tirzah stopped packing as the thought struck her. She was matchmaking. Was that to be her destiny? Tirzah, the matchmaker? Okay, chapter 20 now. There's 2 more chapters left, guys. Okay. Hard lessons. In the night sky, stars hung so low and large, it looked to Tirzah as if she could almost touch them. She could make out the belt of the hunter with its small jewels linking the larger ones down the smallest one. Tirzah sighed and wished for the sleep that usually came too soon to her. She shut her eyes, but the stars shone behind them, turning suddenly to stones falling from the skies. Quietly she opened them. Would she never forget? Again, she saw the valley, the stones covering the boy's body. The boy's mother was an Israelite, his father an Egyptian. In a fight with one of the Israelites, he had blasphemed the name of Yahweh. For days they had kept him under guard until Yahweh spoke his will to Moses. If anyone curses God, he will answer with his life. He had died quickly. They had thrown so many stones. Tirzah was so sorry for his mother. No one spoke openly of the boy, though there was much grumbling in the camp about many things. Tirzah shivered at the thought of Yahweh's anger. She remembered Ram's words. In Egypt, to curse the Pharaoh brought death, a slow, tortured death, Ram said. We all knew this. Doesn't Yahweh's name deserve more honor than the Pharaoh's? His words are just and must be obeyed. It's true, Tirzah thought, but still she was afraid. The stars looking down at her were as bright as ever, only now sleep came unannounced, making her heavy eyelids close. On the following day, the air was like a furnace, the ground baked, and Tirzah had no energy to spare. Helping to set up, take down, fetch water, scrounge for food to add to the daily manna seemed to take all of her time. Days were long, nights were short. It was too hot to sing or joke. Only Abishur still managed to play his flute. Now Tirzah was furious. Arms crossed, she stood her ground under the midday sun. Abihal's face was untroubled. Her blue eyes feigned innocence. Abihal, you can't mean it, Tirzah stormed. How can you suddenly turn away from Abishur? How could you let the wolf of the brother take his place? Your father would never force you to do such a thing. He isn't making me silly, Abihal retorted. Jonathan is a man with property and a leader. I have nothing against Abishur, of course. He will be dear to me as always, but Jonathan is older, more mature, she said. She tossed one thick red braid behind her shoulder to join the other. Everyone agrees that a betrothal before we get to Canaan is best. Jonathan thinks so too. Tirzah stamped her foot. Abishur is worth 10 Jonathans. You know it. Abihal's eyes flashed. Don't be so childish. I don't know why I bother with you. Let me know when you grow up. She turned swiftly and left Tirzah staring and open-mouthed. Abihal was little more than a year and a half older than Tirzah. Tears filled her eyes and she brushed them away. A part of her life was gone. Things between them would never be the same. And Abishur, what about him? The heat continued worse than ever. Like dull thunder, rumblings of discontent rolled through the camp. Some of the worst grumblers went about loudly demanding that something be done. Some shook their fists at the name of Moses. Tirzah wanted to close her eyes to the complaints that grew daily for meat to eat instead of the same old manna. It frightened her to hear shouts of life was better in Egypt than here in this desert. What if their open defiance brought Yahweh's judgment on the whole camp? Late into the night, Tirzah listened to the low voices of her uncle Caleb, Moled, and her father. There was fear now of mutiny. Her worst fears came with the flocks of quail. The birds flew low, like a storm of dark winged wind, wave after wave, dropping down to rest their long flight. The ground was covered with them within a day's walk around the camp. All day and night and the day following, people gathered the quail. Tirzah and Oren worked until their arms ached. It did not occur to Tirzah that Yahweh was angry until the next day. Abishur stood breathless in the tent doorway. Aunt Leah, can you help us? His hair was uncombed, his face gray with tiredness. It's Jonathan and our mother. Tirzah's mother stared blankly at him. Haven't you heard? He cried. The plague is upon us. For weeks there was meat to eat, but Tirzah hated the sight of the roasted quail. Yahweh had sent the meat to that the people demanded, but his anger followed swiftly. Many who ate greedily, forgetting about Yahweh, lay silent now in their graves because of the plague. Jonathan, who hated Moses and blamed him for his father's death, was among those stricken. During the funeral for Jonathan, Tirzah shivered at her father's words. This place is now called Kilbroth Hatavah, the graves of craving. When the others left, she lingered by the graveside with Abishur. Her heart was heavy for him, fatherless and now brotherless. Abishur was pale and weary from the long night watch. He raised his flute one more time in the lonely farewell song to depart him that way in the desert soon to be left behind. As the notes rose, mournful, fading, and rising again, Tirzah saw through his tears that Ephon had come to stand beside her. For a moment she hoped that Abihail too would come, but Tirzah had seen her leave, leaning on the arm of her father, widowed before her marriage. Ephon held Tirzah's hand in her own large, comforting hand, and together they wept as Abishur played. The sickness passed quickly, and once more they were marching toward the promised land. Out of sight of the place of the graves, Tirzah felt lighter, as if a heavy burden was no longer sitting on her shoulders. At Hazroth, Yahweh's cloud stood still, marking the new campsite. Tirzah unpacked her treasures and set the fish stone from Benj into the position of honor. After that, she rocked Deborah in her arms until the baby fell asleep. Leah watched her growing daughter with approval. Tirzah was lean but stronger than ever, the muscles of her legs as hard as a rock, her eyes bright. A glow of pride filled Leah. Tirzah would make a good wife and a mother one day. Unaware of her mother's thoughts, Tirzah rocked baby Deborah in her arms, singing softly to her about the land of milk and honey that they would soon see. I think she already loves the promised land, she said. Look how she smiles, even in sleep. Leah smiled at both her daughters. In Jeroth's tent, the sudden stillness of the night was broken by a cry from Mary. Awakened from sleep, cold sweat ran down her back and her eyes were filled with some half-forgotten dream. Jeroth soothed the girl's trembling, brushing the thick, damp hair from her forehead and whispering words of comfort to her. When Jeroth lay down once again to close to Molad's side to snuggle into her husband's warmth, he mumbled, "Is she all right?" "Yes, she seems to be quiet now," Jeroth replied, her voice low. "But Molad, what is to become of the child? People are so cruel, my husband. Can you imagine blaming this girl for being an Egyptian? She is more uncomplaining, more faithful to Yahweh than the very ones who spurn her. It makes me mad." Molad grunted. "She is safe enough with us. Once we get to the promised land, you'll find her a husband." He rolled over on his stomach. "Besides, I think that young Ram has an eye for her." Jeroth smiled. Ram was a good boy, like his father. The lad had grown up during their travels. Yes, that was a real possibility. Still, Leah would not be keen on having an Egyptian daughter-in-law. Why she was so set against the girl. Jeroth closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift. Tomorrow we would try to talk to Leah. Leah was not in the listening mood. She handed Deborah to Jeroth while she searched for a coin that had fallen from her necklace. The bright silver piece rolled into a corner just out of reach. She seized her broom and she swept it out. "It isn't that I have anything against the girl," she said, picking up the coin, "but I want Ram to marry one of his own, someone who has roots to share with him, you know?" Leah took the baby from Jethro. "Let's not talk about it anymore. Anyway, who is in a hurry about these things, eh?" she said. Gently she touched Deborah's tiny rosebud mouth, which immediately tried to fasten to her finger. Shaking her head, Jeroth turned away from Leah. Some things wouldn't wait, she thought. But what else could she do now? As if reading her thoughts, Leah added, "Yesterday I heard that even Miriam and Aaron were angry with Moses because of his foreign wife. Have you ever heard these rumors?" She didn't pause for Jeroth's, I keep messing up that name, guys, sorry, Jeroth's answer, but went on. "They're saying that Aaron and Miriam have just as much right to lead as Moses, maybe more. His wife is not a Hebrew, and after all, you see what troubles it causes." So that's it, Jeroth thought, turning to face Leah. "I can't think for a moment that the man chosen by Yahweh to lead us from Egypt, the one to whom he gave the commandments, does not please him," she said. Jeroth's tone softened as she pleaded for Mary. "Leah, my dear friend, we've gone through so much together, but in just this one thing I cannot agree with you. We must not forget that Yahweh promised to make our ancestors, Abraham, a father of many nations, to bless many through his descendants. Will you or I cut off one who chooses to love to follow Yahweh?" Jeroth's eyes were full of tears. "If Yahweh accepts Moses as wife and Mary as well, mustn't we?" Leah was still for a long moment. "I can accept the girl," she half whispered, "but Ram must marry within his own people." No more was said till Tirzah ran breathlessly into the tent, her face white as the broom flower. "Mother, it's Miriam. They've turned her out of the camp." Tirzah stood still, her heart pounding. "Maka and I were near the tent of the meeting. We saw a crowd gathering and ran to see what was happening. It was terrible, terrible." Tirzah could not control the sobs that bathed her face with tears and choked her words. "She was snow white, a leper, her hands, her face, all that we could see." A look of horror washed over Leah's face. "But why? But how?" she stuttered. "Oh, Mother, Yahweh has punished her for speaking against Moses." Tirzah's words felt like a knife into Leah's heart. Without a word, she handed Deborah to Tirzah and went quickly from the tent and followed by Jeroth. For 3 days, her mother mourned, eating nothing, drinking only a little water. The baby cried for what seemed like hours to end. Tirzah rocked the baby, held her, walked her, but nothing helped. On the 3rd day, her father put his foot down. Tall and muscular, he stood with both feet planted solidly in the front tent doorway. His black eyes took in the scene unchanged for the last 3 days. "Tirzah, fetch a bowl of stew for your mother," he roared. Tirzah hurried to obey him. From outside the tent, she could hear his booming voice. "Enough, Leah, I've had enough. You don't eat, the baby doesn't eat. You will eat, do you hear me? I won't have you upsetting this household like this for 2 whole weeks while Miriam suffers for her punishment." He leaned down and he drew his wife to her feet. "Now, woman, Yahweh has said that in 2 weeks her leprosy will be taken away. Can't you be patient?" Her mother fell sobbing into his arms. "Oh, Jerahiel, what of me? I, too, was guilty of her sin," she sobbed. Tirzah stood stricken in the doorway, her mother's food held stilly in one hand. What was her mother saying? "I sinned, Jerahiel. I too spoke against Moses' wife." Her mother's words cut into Tirzah's chest. "Oh, my husband, I did not want to think of our ram marrying an Egyptian girl, and I was angry." Her father's voice was full of astonishment. "You mean that you would not consider Mary," he asked, "a girl who has left all to follow Yahweh, who risked her life to be faithful to him?" "Yes, oh yes," Leah cried. I'm guilty." She was almost unable to stand and sank weakly against his chest. For a long moment there was silence. "We will go to Aaron with an offering. It will be all right, my love. Hush now." His big hand stroked her hair gently. "We have all learned much on this journey. Yahweh is merciful." Tirzah swallowed hard. If only her mother could see Ram's eyes brighten at the sound of Mary's voice, or watch Mary's face as Ram taught her the stories of Yahweh, she would love her. On that day, after Miriam's cure, when the whole camp moved out to the desert of Paran, Ram asked his mother to arrange for his betrothal to Mary. With a long, quiet look, his mother gave her assent. Tirzah, dancing for joy, ran to Ephan. Promise me that you will sing at the celebration," she begged. Ephan blushed, making her cheery face quite pretty, but she promised. "But remember," she said, "you must stand next to me all the while." When we heard the news, Oren threw his crutch into the air, narrowly missing the water pot, and whooped loudly. "I am to be a brother-in-law to Pesar's niece." and she makes the best ink and parchment around. Laughing, Jerahiel retrieved Oren's crutch for him, inspecting it with critical eye before handing it back. I think it's time we made you a new crutch, son, he said. I want to wait, Father, Oren answered quietly. A puzzled silence filled the tent, and all eyes turned to Oren expectantly. This one has come a long way with me. I'd rather wait till we reach the new land for another. Let it be so, son, Jerahiel said. Amen, Leah added. Amen, whispered Tirzah. Okay, guys, this is the last chapter. 21, A Song of Hope. Kadesh was a good place for the camp. Tirzah knelt by a little spring and splashed its cold, clear water on her face, then her arms. Sitting back on her heels, she listened to its burbling rush around the stones sticking above the water. The sound of running water was a good sound, one she would never forget. Her own water skin was full, and Ephan was nearly finished filling hers. Ephan, what are you ever afraid of? Tirzah suddenly asked. I mean, do you think we will have to fight the Canaanites the way that we fought the Amalekites? Moses says that Yahweh will drive out the people of the land before us. I know he will, but Ram says we must fight too. Tirzah sat still, thinking of the last war, the only war she had seen so far. Ephan lifted her water skin, her broad face thoughtful. Maybe both Ram and Moses are right. Yahweh alone fought the Egyptians for us, she said. I know, Tirzah interrupted, but we fought the Amalekites, hastily, she added, and Yahweh gave us victory, if that's what you mean. As they walked, Ephan said in a gentle voice, You asked me if I ever felt afraid. Sometimes at night I think about what could happen. Another raid, or worse, a mutiny in the camp, that scares me more. She sighed. Some people turn away from following Yahweh over the least hard thing. I am not very brave, but one lesson I've learned from my father is stick to the job. Whatever it is, I can't help it. I just plod ahead. The hard jobs sometimes turn out to be the ones that make you feel best about yourself when the thing's done. When Ephan said what she said made sense, and Tirzah nodded. You're strong, Ephan. I just want to get to the promised land as fast as we can. The path narrowed, forcing them to go single file past an outcrop of rocks on either side. It can't be too much longer, Tiz, Ephan said. The men Moses sent to spy out the land should be coming back soon. Tirzah balanced her water skin carefully until she was on flat ground once more. My father is anxious for Uncle Caleb to come back with news. The men had been gone for almost a month. No one knew if they were safe or not. She was proud that her favorite uncle was one of the 12 men chosen to spy out the land of Canaan. But why weren't they back? People were beginning to worry. Aloud, she said, When there's a job to do, Uncle Caleb's like your father. He just keeps on till it's done. At least she hoped so. Tirzah and Ephan were hardly back when the news came. They've come, they've come. The shout rang through the camp. From every direction, people dropped what they were doing and ran. The men had returned. Tirzah snatched a glimpse of her uncle among them as she passed. Like the rest, his clothes were stained, his face dirty and tired, but she could wave. They were swallowed up in a rush of people. At the tent of meeting, the crowds waited for the word. Tirzah stood with her mother next to Jeroth and her family to hear the news pass from tribe to tribe. The report began well. A good land flowing with milk and honey, the word came down. You should see the size of the grapes, big and sweet, like these we brought to show you. The pomegranates, too, wonderful. Good soil, well watered. Tirzah was almost dizzy with joy, but what was this that they were saying now? Walled cities and people so large that they made us look like grasshoppers. Descendants of Ankh, a race of giants. Amalekites living there as well. The people are too strong for us. Tirzah stood frozen at the words. Then, like the strong man that he was, she heard her Uncle Caleb's voice roaring above the rest. There is no need to fear. Listen to Moses. We can take possession of the land. We are all able to overcome it. Young Joshua stood by her uncle, adding his plea to Caleb's. It was useless. Not one of the other 10 spies agreed with them. The decision of the others was firm. We can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. Women tore their clothes and men shook their fists at Moses and Aaron. Some wailed and others shouted in anger. The crowds were getting out of hand. In the confusion, Jerahiel pushed and elbowed to drag his family to safety. For an instant, Tirzah lost sight of her father. Then Ram was pulling her by the arm out of the crush of the crowd. Panic made her heart beat faster as Ram led her through the chaos. Free of the crowds at last, they reached the tent safely. Then her father returned with Ram Moled to help Caleb. It was a day like none Tirzah had ever since their flight from the Egyptian army. In the tent, her mother lay on the ground weeping and moaning. Baby Deborah, worn out with crying, slept in her bed. For once, Jeroth, the beautiful, cheerful Jeroth, could comfort no one. She too lay face down upon the ground in her tent, weeping quietly. There was no one to turn to. Tirzah's legs felt weak, her whole body numb. She sat down in the tent doorway where she could see and wait. What was she waiting for? She didn't know. After a while, she thought to look up and see if Yahweh's cloud was still above the tabernacle. It was. Yahweh was still with them. Yahweh is giving us the promised land, she thought. He can do it. Uncle Caleb and Joshua said so, too. Her mother's sobs still came from the tent periodically, and finally Tirzah rose and went to her. It will be all right, Mother, she crooned. Listen, Uncle Caleb knows. Her mother made no response, her face still buried in her arms. In her corner of her tent, baby Deborah slept peacefully. Mother, remember the song of Moses? Tirzah began to hum it, then sing it. Horse and rider he has hurled into the sea. Her mother lifted her head at last, her large eyes full of sorrow. Not this time, little bird. Yahweh is angry with us for our sins, she said haltingly. With a sudden rush of fear, she clutched Tirzah to her fiercely. I cannot bear to see you die, she wailed. When her mother's grip loosened a little, Tirzah pleaded with her, rocking with her like a child. Mother, mother, I'm not going to die. Yahweh is still with us. Have you forgotten his cloud? Come and see it, mother, please. Leah only covered her eyes, shaking her head. No, little one, not this time. Don't you see? Many have died under Yahweh's cloud. He is angry with us, angry with us. Tirzah could get nowhere with her mother. By evening, the crowds who had listened all day to the words of the 10 men were ready to stone Moses. We want a new leader, one cried, and the refrain was picked up and repeated. Others shouted for the return to Egypt. The Canaanites will take our wives and our children, someone screamed. The entire camp was assembled to listen and decide what to do. Tirzah stood once more by her trembling mother, who leaned heavily against Jerahiel. Moses and Aaron lay on their faces before the people. Once more, Caleb and Joshua tried to appeal to the crowds. But do not rebel against the Lord, her uncle was crying out. If Yahweh is pleased with us, he will give us this land. Do not be afraid of the people. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Tirzah wanted to cheer her uncle's words about Yahweh's name, but the muttering crowds frightened her, and her voice barely whispered, the Lord is with us. People are picking up stones, Ram said. They'll stone Moses and Aaron. Caleb and Joshua, no, he shouted. Almost at the same time, the cloud of glory seemed to swell with burning fire at the tent of meeting. Someone cried, look, Yahweh's glory. The crowds hushed to silence, so thick Tirzah could feel it. She trembled as if she had a fever. Would Yahweh's anger strike them all? Moses entered the tabernacle while the people stood waiting. It seemed to Tirzah that the most awful moment of her life. Every eye turned toward him when he reappeared. With halting steps, Moses walked from the tabernacle to face the people. Tears streamed down his face as he brought them Yahweh's words. Tirzah felt her own heart breaking. Yahweh's love and mercy are great, Moses began, in a choked voice that grew stronger as he continued. He forgives sin and rebellion, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. From bowed head to bowed head, a sigh rose from one breath above the people. Only Caleb and Joshua, Moses went on, and the children you said would be taken as plunder will enter the promised land. A murmur like a great gasp broke from the listeners. Wait, Moses cried out, there is more. Only those under the age of 20 will enter the land, but you and your children shall wander as shepherds in the desert for 40 years until only the children remain, and then they shall enter the land. In a stillness as deathly as that of a mass funeral, the people went quietly to their tents. No one argued, no one protested, no one spoke to a neighbor. They lit no fire that night, but sat as a little family in a group. Her father, mother, Ram, Oren, small Deborah, Abishur, and herself. Tirzah could not speak for grief. With a burning lump in her throat, she listened to her father. Tears rolled down his face as he prayed. When he was through, he held his wife's hand in his own large one. "My children," he said, "though we shall never see the good land Yahweh has promised, you will." He paused for strength. Sorry, guys, my throat. He paused for strength, and then he went on, "Your mother and I will prepare for you the day that will come when you shall enter the land. You will take our places, be our eyes, our ears. Your joy will be for us too." Tirzah could hardly bear the pain in her heart as he continued, "We shall teach you all that we can, my dear ones, for as long as Yahweh wills. Remember, my dear," he patted his weeping wife's shoulder, "we are forgiven. Yahweh's love is great and his decree is just. He will care for us all of our days here in the desert. Always we will look up and see his cloud of glory with us." His mother nodded, unable to speak. "And though we die here in the desert, our lives can be good ones, eh?" He lifted his hands high for a silent moment. From somewhere, the words of the Song of Moses made their way to Tirzah's lips. "Sing to the Lord, for he has risen up in triumph. Horse and rider he has hurled into the sea," she whispered. Abishur began to play his flute, and backed by the music, Tirzah's voice grew stronger. One by one, the others joined them, singing with voices still heavy with pain, but behind the pain, hope. Okay, guys, that's the end. This is the author, by the way. Oh, hold on. Oh, gosh. Sorry. It's tough when I have this. There it is. Okay. For any of you moms, parents that are interested, again, book is called Tirzah. It's by Lucille Travis. And I actually really enjoyed this book. I think it started out kind of slow, but you know what? Finishing this book up, I'm glad I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed it, actually. And it kind of really picks up there towards the middle to the end part. Really picks up. And it was a beautiful story. So I hope you guys all enjoy it. I hope that you guys have a great summer. Again, Miss Mary and I love teaching you guys, and we just pray blessings over all of you and God's protection over all of you, okay? God bless. Bye, guys.